Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the movie review series. And today I'm going to be talking about Transformers 1, which was just released on October 11th, 2024, and I've just been to see it at the cinema. And I can honestly tell you now, this movie was so good, so much fun to watch, very well paced, great story, solid dialogue, very well executed, you name it. Transformers 1 not only fulfilled my expectations but exceeded them as well. And this was the first time that we have ever had a complete Transformers CGI animated movie. So that for me was something a little bit different. This was something that I had wanted to see in a Transformers movie. And it's hard to believe that this is the first Transformers animated movie that we've had since 1986's Transformers the movie. So that's 38 years ago. That is absolutely insane. And, you know, as a Transformers fan for so many years, I have never cared for the live action stuff. Anybody who knows me, I have never ever cared for the live action stuff. The first one was decent, the second was terrible, the third one was even worse, and I stopped after that. The Bumblebee movie was great, but deep down, as a G1 fan, I wanted an animated movie because, you know, you can't really go wrong with animation. And, some of my favorite movies have been animation. So I had always hoped that we would get a Transformers animated movie. And when they announced that we were going to get one for 2024, I was so excited and so relieved that we weren't going to get another live action outing. No more of that stuff. Live action has been done to death, and quite frankly, most of them have been terrible. Animation is the way to go, and one thing that the Spider Verse movies and the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie have shown is that animation can have a place on the big screen and deserves to be right up there with live action. Because obviously, when you say animation, people are going to think of Disney. Oh no, Disney should be on the big screen. Yes, Disney deserves its place on the big screen. They've more than earned it. Disney is legendary, but I feel that other cartoons deserve their shot at the big screen. And, with Transformers 1, I'm so glad we got that because for me, when it comes to Transformers cartoons, you can't go wrong. You honestly cannot go wrong. Now, this was a different kind of Transformers movie, and this was an interesting one. We didn't really get your typical Autobots versus Decepticons. You did see that, but it wasn't all about that. There was a much deeper story going on in this movie. This movie took us right back to the very beginning. How did Optimus Prime and Megatron first meet? Now, in the comic books, for those of you who have read any of the comic books, you know that they have delved into that stuff, but we've never really seen it in animation. We did get a little taste of it in the classic G1 cartoon in an episode called War Dawn, where the aerial bots went back to the golden age of Cybertron in the past and met Optimus Prime when he was Orion Pax. That was the closest thing we got to an Optimus Prime origin story. But again, we never really went into full depth with that. So we got that here in Transformers 1. This was more or less like a prequel. How did the war start? How did Optimus Prime and Megatron meet? Why did they become enemies? And this was a story that I was really hoping to see get addressed. And I think for the most part, they did a really good job. I mean, yes, there was a little bit of humour in this movie, but I feel that we got a nice balance with the story. There was some humour, there was some emotion, there was a little bit of dark stuff in there as well, but I think they got to a nice place where it wasn't too dark, but it wasn't too light, it wasn't too kid friendly. It was just right to say, you know what, I can work with this. This is a good formula. I can get behind this. Now, the cast for Transformers 1. We have Chris Hemsworth as the voice of Optimus Prime. Now, I know everyone's going to say, oh, he's not Peter Cullen. No, of course he's not Peter Cullen. No one is ever going to be Peter Cullen. Not even close. Peter Cullen, for me, is the Kevin Conroy of Transformers. He is the definitive voice of Optimus Prime. When I think of Optimus Prime, I think of one guy, Peter Cullen. He is the man. He is Optimus Prime. There is nobody out there who can pull off Optimus Prime quite like him. When I hear Optimus Prime's voice, that's the guy I think of. That's Peter Cullen. Now, when they announced that Chris Hemsworth was going to be providing the voice of Optimus Prime, I was very skeptical because when I think of Chris Hemsworth, I think of Thor, who he plays in the MCU. So for a guy like Chris Hemsworth to step into the massive shoes that is of Peter Cullen, I thought this guy really has his work cut out for him. Can he deliver a great performance worthy of the legendary voice of Peter Cullen? He did a great job, much better than I expected, and I like the fact that he didn't go out of his way to sound like Peter Cullen. He went into the role of Optimus Prime and made it his own. He didn't try to copy what came before. And I fully respect that because there's nothing worse than somebody just coming in and just being a copycat of an iconic figure. It's always important to put your own stamp on things, make it your own. And Chris Hemsworth, to his credit, did a fine job. At times, I could hear Thor in his voice, which is understandable because he's been playing Thor for so long and he's practically, you know, one in the same with that character. So, it was noticeable, but I thought as the movie went along, he got better and you could really start to hear the Optimus Prime coming through his performance. I thought he did a really good job. Now, the voice of Megatron was provided by Brian Tyree Henry. Now, obviously, when you think of Megatron, you think of Frank Welker. Frank Welker to me is what Mark Hamill is to the Joker. He is the definitive voice of Megatron. There are very few people out there who can pull off Megatron quite like Frank Welker. So, Brian Tyree Henry really had some massive shoes to fill, just like Chris Hemsworth for Peter Cullen. And, you know, Brian Tyree Henry, he did a good job as Megatron. His Megatron was very different to Frank Welker. When you hear Frank Welker's voice of Megatron, it's very evil, like the evil Decepticon, which is, of course, iconic. With this Megatron, the voice that Brian Tyree Henry puts on and delivers in his performance, you could hear some stubbornness, you could hear some anger, and you could hear a bit of playfulness as well, and some cockiness. And that's a side of Megatron that's never really been explored much in the old G1 cartoons. We never really got to know the real Megatron because when we see Megatron in the original cartoons, he's already the evil Decepticon leader that we love to hate. So when we first see Megatron in this movie, he's kind of like the best friend you have in high school. He's always there watching your back and he'll come to your aid if you're in trouble. That's kind of how I look at it with this Megatron. And Brian Tyree Henry did a really good job. I thought he did a really good job when he starts out as this really tough but friendly guy, and by the end of the movie, he obviously goes to the dark side. So he's really plays the big brother role very well. Now, Elita 1 was voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And for those of you who know that name, Scarlett Johansson played Black Widow in the MCU. So we kind of got a little bit of an MCU reunion here with Chris Hemsworth and Scarlett Johansson. Now, Elita 1's an interesting character because Elita 1 in the original G1 cartoon only appeared in one episode, and that was it. She does appear in the comic books, and she did have a big part in those comics, and she also recently appeared in the War for Cybertron Netflix shows. So we've kind of got to see Elita 1 in Transformers media in recent years, but other than that, she's always been almost exclusive to the comics. And for those who remember watching the original cartoon, Optimus Prime and Elita 1 were very close and maybe a bit more than friends, perhaps. But Elita 1 in the movie is completely different. She's not the warrior that we know in the original cartoon. She's more like an officer, like a miner, so to speak. She still has all of that fearlessness that we know her for, but she has no time for Optimus Prime, or shall we say Orion Pax, before he makes his transition. She has no time for him whatsoever. And I thought Scarlett Johansson did a really good job with Elita 1. As I said, Elita 1 wasn't really a popular character in the old G1 cartoons, so it was kind of cool to see her have a much bigger role in this story. And of course, Bumblebee was voiced by Keegan Michael Key. Bumblebee, in recent years, he's really grown into becoming one of the major players in the Transformers franchise because everyone remembers, even me, in the original Transformers cartoon, he was like the little baby of the team. He was the one that everyone had to go and rescue. And Prime would always say, "No, you stay here, Bumblebee. It's too dangerous. If there's any emergency, we'll call you." So he was kind of like the little baby of the team. But in recent years, Bumblebee has really grown and matured into a badass warrior in his own right. Now, in the movie, however, Bumblebee is a miner, a little bit of a chatterbox, a bit goofy, but that was what Bumblebee was in the old cartoons. He was a very happy-go-lucky guy and always happy to help out, have fun, and be there for his friends. And you get that here with Bumblebee, but he's a little bit more of a fanboy. But he was a lot of fun. He really was. Lawrence Fishburne provided the voice of Alpha Trion. Great to have Alpha Trion in the movie. Alpha Trion, of course, in the original cartoon, created Optimus Prime, so he got to play a big part here. And Lawrence Fishburne did a really good job providing the voice of Alpha Trion. And John Hamm provided the voice of Sentinel Prime. See, I was quite surprised about John Hamm appearing in a movie like this because I've always known John Hamm to be a really serious actor. So to see him in a film like this, it was different, but at the same time, he kicked a lot of ass and he was really good in this movie. Much better than I expected. And obviously, Sentinel Prime would be revealed to be the bad guy. And yeah, John Hamm did a really good job with this one. He done a really good job in this movie. So this movie, as I mentioned earlier, focuses on the story about how Optimus Prime and Megatron first met and how they became enemies. Now, Optimus Prime, in the beginning, he is called Orion Pax, and Megatron is called D16. So I think that's quite interesting that they gave Megatron a different name before he would become the evil Decepticon leader. And they're like brothers, and that was always mentioned quite a lot in the Transformers media. Optimus Prime and Megatron were closer than brothers. So it's interesting to see how the two would end up going on different paths, and how Megatron, or shall I say D16, turns to the dark side is quite interesting because I was always under the impression, going by the comics and even in the old G1 cartoons, Megatron was power hungry. And while you do get that here, his reason for turning to the dark side is quite interesting. He doesn't just wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to take over Cybertron. Pax, do you want to help me or not? No. All right, go away. His reason here was more to do with betrayal. You know, he looked up to Sentinel Prime as this heroic figure, and to find out that Sentinel Prime was a liar who was secretly working for the Quintessons, he felt betrayed, he felt hurt, and you get to really see him slowly go off the cliff, go off over the edge. And I thought that was a really good, interesting story arc for Megatron because at the beginning we see him, he's Pax's best friend, always has his back, but then as he learns the truth, one thing I did find really interesting, and I thought that was a really nice touch, you start to see his eyes turn a different colour. Now, at the beginning, his eyes are yellow. By the end, his eyes are dark red. So it's almost like that hatred is just building and building until eventually he embraces it. I thought that was very well done. And giving him the iconic Decepticon symbol was a nice touch because when you first see that symbol, you know, oh boy, we know where this is heading. And it was great. And one interesting thing that was added to the story, which I found interesting, was before they came online, Sentinel Prime had their transforming cogs removed, which is the reason why you don't see them transform into their vehicle modes. I thought that was a nice touch. I thought that was a good twist. Rather than just have them transform already, why don't they transform into their vehicle modes? We learn the reason why. Great stuff. And, you know, to see Megatron eventually embrace the dark side, you know, turning on Orion Pax and essentially destroying him before he was resurrected as Optimus Prime, I thought was brilliant stuff. Really good storytelling here. As I said, you know, this was something that I always wanted to see, you know, a prequel. How did Optimus Prime and Megatron become the iconic enemies that we all know? There must have been a reason. They couldn't have just been enemies for that long. And this movie did a really good job telling that story. As I said, this was something that I always wanted to see, and they did a good job executing it. And we got to see many other iconic characters for the first time: Starscream, Shockwave, and Soundwave. And, you know, we got to see the Decepticon army being built up. We get to see the Autobots army get built up. We got to see it all here. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved all of it. And it definitely left it wide open for a sequel. Bring it on. That's what I've got to say. And how Orion Pax becomes Optimus Prime. He gains control of the Matrix and he is essentially rebuilt. Now, in the original cartoon, Alpha Trion rebuilt him in his workshop after Megatron blasted him. It's kind of the same thing here, but the execution is completely different. But it works really well for the story. And it was fantastic. It really was. I can't really think of anything bad to say about this movie. As I said at the beginning, you can't really go wrong with animation. 95% of the time for me, animated movies always work. You never ever go wrong with animation. Had this had been live action, I don't know if I would be saying the same thing. Who knows? Maybe it would have still been good. Who knows? But I think going forward in the animated path, I think it was the right call to make. I think it was the right thing to do. And this was so good. Such an enjoyable movie. And we get to see two post-credit scenes. Bumblebee talking to his air quote friends, and obviously Megatron forming his Decepticon army. Great stuff. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Starscream. How Megatron and Starscream meet is quite funny because they are captured by the High Guard. That is the original name of the Decepticons. And seeing Starscream as kind of like a leader was really weird because everyone remembers Starscream was always obsessed with being the leader of the Decepticons because he always deemed himself the most worthy and the most qualified. But to see him here already a leader and having him and Megatron going at it for the first time, yeah, anybody who knows these characters very well, you know the history that these two have, and you know the bickering they would go on to have, which would become one of the staple parts of the Transformers franchise for so many decades. It's just second to none. So it's kind of cool that we got to see these two evil figures going at it for the first time. So I thought that was a nice touch. A little bit different to how I would have done it, but I've got no issue with that. I liked it. I thought it was really good. But overall, I would say this movie was as much Optimus Prime's story as it was Megatron's. I would probably say this was more Prime's story than Megatron's because this was all about Orion Pax gaining control of the Matrix, becoming Optimus Prime, and going on to become the greatest Autobot leader of all time. And it's interesting to see that how at the beginning he's not quite sure of himself. He's still, I wouldn't say happy-go-lucky. He's very free-spirited. He loves having fun. He's a bit naive. He's a bit dumb. But over the course of time, you know, Orion Pax has a good heart, and you know he inspires everyone. You know, and that's what I've always said about Prime. He's like the dad of the Autobots. Everyone looks up to him. Everyone respects him, and he inspires everyone. We definitely got to see that here in this movie, and I'd love to see more of that in the sequel. I think that could make for some really good storytelling. So, my overall rating for this movie, I am going to go out of my way and say this movie was more than worthy of 9 out of 10. Yep, I said it. 9 out of 10. I would give Transformers 1. This was excellent. You know, very close to near perfection. I wouldn't say 10 out of 10. It was very close, but I would say 9 out of 10 for this movie. This was so good, and I had high hopes for this one, and I wasn't disappointed. And the highlight for me was seeing Megatron and Optimus Prime going at it for the first time. Epic stuff. But yeah, Transformers 1, 9 out of 10. Great stuff. Looking forward to the sequel already. Can't wait. And this was a lot of fun. This movie was 1 hour and 44 minutes long, so decent length. Wasn't too long, wasn't too short, just right for an animated movie. And I loved every second of it. And I can't wait for the next one. This was a huge deal for me. This was something I wanted to see for many, many years since the first animated movie from 1986. Let's just hope we don't have to wait any longer for another one. Let's hope this is the start of many more Transformers animated movies to come. Bring it on. Let's go. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of Transformers 1? Did you enjoy it? Did you think the story was well executed? Would you like to see a sequel? And if so, what would you like the movie to be about? Do you think Chris Hemsworth did a great job as Optimus Prime? Do you think Brian Tyree Henry did a great job as the voice of Megatron? What did you think of Scarlett Johansson as Elita 1? Do you think she did a great job as well? And do you think Keegan Michael Key did a great job as Bumblebee? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the movie review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening, and remember, to all are one.